Frankenstein, Dracula, werewolves, phantoms, zombies, gorgons, mad scientists, abominable snowmen. These are the monsters that they have created. Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Ingrid Pitt, Veronica Carson, Oliver Reed, Madeline Smith, Barbara Shelley, Michael Gow, Hazel Court, Bartine Beswick. These are the people that faced the horrors. Jimmy Sangster, Terrence Fisher, Michael Carreras, Peter Sasty, John Elder, Evan Jones, Anthony Hines. These are the people who created the horrors behind Hammer Studios. Welcome to Conversations in Hammer Studio Horrors, your gateway into classic horror cinema, brought to you by Broken Lighthouse Pictures and Something Wicked Entertainment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Hammer Studio Horrors. I want to welcome you, and my name is Kevin L. Powers. I am the owner-operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and please, we hope that you're going to enjoy this conversation that we're going to have today, because if you're a Hammer fan or just classic horror films, you're really going to like the story in the conversation we're going to have today. So what we do on our show is me and a special guest will sit down and we will discuss, analyze, critique an individual film, and then we will kind of have a conversation and have fun with it, be entertained, and hope that you will be entertained and enjoy our conversation as well. Sometimes these are some great movies, sometimes they're not as great as we would like them to be, but still we hope you enjoy the conversation, whether you've seen the film or not, or if you are rewatching it again just for the fun of it. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest for today's show, and that's going to be Dave Watkins. Thank you, Dave, for joining the show today.
Yeah, good to be on here.
And as usual, we are going to be discussing one of the great Hammer films of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and that is The Vampire Lovers from 1970. Now, everyone who's been listening to this program, we have kind of tackled a lot of the vampire films because Hammer made a lot of vampire films. But this was part of a separate series of films that were separate from the Dracula franchise that we're doing. They were known as the Karstein trilogy. I always get that mixed up.
Karnstein's right. The Karnstein trilogy. Yeah. It's always Karn something though in there.
Do you remember in what order this one was? Because we've been doing these out of order.
So this is the first of three.
Okay,
the third one is a prequel to this one though.
Okay.
This one's set in 1794 predominantly, except for the opening sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
all right,
it's based on the 1872 novel Carmilla, which is about a female vampire seducing a young woman it began the lesbian vampire trope. But it also predated Bram Stoker's Dracula's novel of 1897. So it's one of the earlier vampire stories.
Okay. Well, that's great background, especially considering that we've done these films out of order.
Yeah.
So when did you see this film kind of for the first time, and what was kind of your impressions of it?
Yeah, so I saw it. Scream Factory released a version of it a few years ago on Blu-ray. And it's pretty good transfer. And I wasn't that familiar with it. I was very familiar with Hammer, but I wasn't familiar with this particular film. So being a Hammer film, I was a little surprised by the lesbian stuff in it. And it's not like hardcore lesbian, but I was a little surprised by that. But I thought it was pretty strong. It's a pretty strong vampire film, good acting in it.
Okay. This one was one of the earlier films of Hammer's that I saw, mostly because I didn't realize it was a Hammer film when I first saw it.
It is a later Hammer film too. It would be in 1970. It's like they've already been doing these for, they started in 58 with the horror films.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the title of the movie I saw with this one. But I think it was lesbian vampires. I think it's the other movie I saw when I saw this because I saw two of them at the same time, mostly because I didn't really know the difference between the two. The vampire.
Yeah, yeah. Lesbian vampire, is that a French film or something like that?
Yeah, I think yeah.
It's a vampire Lesbos.
Both. I think that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
They actually have a new Severin release of that. I've never seen it. I did order it. They have a new 4K release of that coming out. So
Yes, Vampiros Lesbos. See,
yeah,
what happened was I did when I saw both these films, I didn't realize they were different films. So what I did was I kind of watched one of them and I was like, that's not what I read about. And then realized I was watching the French one, or is it French or yes, Just Franco. I have to remember who directed
just,
it. I saw the Just Franco one first, and then I went
yeah.
back and watched the Vampire Lovers, thinking that they were the same damn movie. Um, I I
With
enjoyed
that,
both.
with that, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying I enjoyed both movies for different reasons.
Yeah, yeah,
But I didn't. I At the time when I saw it, I wasn't. I still wasn't into what Hammer Studios was when I saw it. It was probably a good 10, 15 years later when I had the chance to rewatch this film, knowing that it was a Hammer film, and then realizing how close to the Hammer aesthetics that it really was. Although that being said, Vampiros Lesbos is a much different film, and maybe we'll get into the Jess Franco world of horror much later on because we
yeah.
have not talked about any of Jess Franco's films on this program yet.
Well, yeah, I've got it coming, so you can put me down for it. But that one, I would assume has a lot more nudity and sex in it. If I'm, yeah, I would assume.
Yes.
It's also there's also like so I've seen recently some Jean Rollin films that were made in the same time period, and so as much as this, when we talked about with the Twins of Evil, when we talked about that one, I was misremembering this, where I did remember it, but for some reason I thought there is nudity in it, but I thought there was more nudity and more sex in the film. But since I saw this one, I have seen some of Jean Rollin's films, and those are like a lot more than sex and nudity in them. And it's like, because he used to direct pornos, of course, but it doesn't make the movies better. This is a better movie, but it's just kind of a little. In once you see that though, this is the nudity and the lesbian part of it is somewhat tame compared to the
Yes.
French films.
Yeah, yeah. That was my impression too after the way I saw them. But thankfully, as time went on and I learned what Hammer Studio was, because I was learning about, the UK film industry and learning about Amicus and Hammer Studios at the same time and some of the other films, I kind of delved into a lot of those classic horror films from the 60s, 70s, and I got to integrate myself into the Hammer Studio fold, which is why we're talking about it now for this podcast, is because I like splurged on Hammer for like a good year, watching everything and anything I could watch, but I did not watch most of it in order.
Yeah.
I kind of watched what I could find, and so a lot of it was out of order. And so this being one of the first ones I watched, I kept thinking that most of the other Hammer films would be very similar in terms of the nudity in it, but that was not the case,
Yeah.
obviously.
It's really interesting watching them in order and seeing how just the time changed. Like you see everything changing
Yes.
as the movies go on. But here, this one is a period piece, but it does have an extensive amount of more nudity and a little bit more violence than some of the earlier ones.
Hmm.
The something I was going to point out too, just another production thing where this wasn't produced by the normal, and we talked about this with the Twins of Evil,
Yes.
but it wasn't produced by the normal Hammer people. Producers Harry Fine and Michael Stahl produced this trilogy, and writer Tudor Gates wrote all three of them. That was the only three movie Hammer films that they worked on.
Yeah, yeah. Good thing you brought that back up to make sure that for everyone who listens to our podcast and Twins of Evil, you also hear some of the same information about kind of the time in which these films were actually made and released. We've been kind of delving into that a little bit, but unfortunately, we did not watch these in order, so it's going to be a little bit. Interesting.
But we did watch them in order technically, if you consider the first one a prequel, because we haven't done the second one yet, which would chronologically, as far as the timelines of the film, be the last one. So.
Oh Jesus! Which is fun. Which is funny. Which I find funny because I actually, I had when I rewatched this film for the podcast, I actually ended up enjoying it more than I remembered enjoying the film. I guess it's because time has been very kind for this film for me. Because I think back then when I was much younger, Vampiros Lesbos put like a shadow over this film. Because this film starts off really like it just starts straight in with the action when what's our character Hartog, who
Yeah, the Baron Hartog.
yeah, is it I meant to remember, is this relayed as a flashback or is we seeing this in real time?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't
So
remember.
no, here's what it is. Like, and this I did say this wrong earlier. 1794 is when the flashback takes place.
Okay.
As you see the Baron Hartog, he's a lot younger here.
Yeah,
When it goes to what is in this movie present day time around, I'm assuming around 1820, he's got white hair and he's
yeah,
significantly older. The actor at the time, Douglas Wilmer, was 50 years old. So he was kind of in the middle. So they probably made him look younger with a wig for the earlier scenes and maybe made him put like a either dyed his hair, put a white wig on him for the later part of it.
yeah.
But he plays like a Van Helsing like character that could have been Peter Cushing, and he actually has it's very Peter Cushing like part where Peter Cushing actually appears in this movie as more of a Jonathan Harker type of character.
Very interesting. I didn't think about that. You are absolutely right. You are the way that there are they come into the story. You are absolutely right. That could be that's interesting. Um,
And Peter Cushing still kind of leans kind of towards Van Helsing, but at the same time, if you think about the character Jonathan Harker is becoming Van Helsing in a way in the original Dracula movie because he ends up going with him and helping him
yeah.
do the stuff in the at the end of the novel.
Well, with this film, since we're talking about the opening sequence has the younger Hartog, and he's relaying the kind of like the myth of the vampire. And
Very heavy narration, and it
that's a
sounds
heavy. That's
yeah,
why I had to
yeah,
think about is this a flashback or is this like in real time? Because I was trying to remember that how it actually comes
yeah.
across because of so much narration that he does. I don't even think his character actually talks. I think it's all narration because
Yeah, during that part, yeah. But for the most part, I think it's weird because I almost feel like the way that it is, it almost seems like that part was maybe intended to be a flashback because we see most of it again later, and then they after the fact, and this is just conjecture on my part, after the fact decided to put it at the beginning to make the beginning more exciting.
oh
I don't know that for sure, but that's the way it appears to me, especially because they show everything again later. And Baron Hartog with that narration, which sound like which it later on when he's on screen, he still talks like that. He talks in like narr that in paragraph forms like that. It's pretty funny. But some of the well, it's not funny, but it is, but it's not. It's not funny when we're watching. It's not funny. He's actually pretty solid doing it, but it's like he makes it so in that last act, like Peter Cushing's more like listening to everything that he says, and Peter Cushing's got like a one liner every now and then. It's more of a reaction line to
yeah.
whatever Hartog's saying.
Dog is explaining everything. It's like
Yeah.
he's been that incident in the very beginning where he sets himself up to kill the vampire that has been plaguing the town by stealing her shroud and preventing her from being able to sleep at peace, and then getting her the teasing her with her own shroud to come to him before he.
So these vampires are there's a lot different rules for these vampires
Yes.
than normally. And the shroud is a burial thing that goes over a dead body in case
Mhm.
anybody they probably know, but they may not. I actually just wanted to double check and look that up. But she's still wearing like some kind of flowy robe thing that looks like a shroud, but that's actually her burial gown the very first scene starts with her coming out, like walking through this really spooky cemetery. And it looks pretty cool. It's a pretty cool opening, and you don't
Yep.
know what it is. She looks like a phantom, wearing like a phantom-y like dress with a hood over it that looks almost like a shroud.
Yes, it did. That's why when the shroud actually falls off, I was a little confused. I was like, but her face and everything is still completely covered. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it looks cool though.
yeah. It's a cool like effect because when you see her, she's like this really beautiful blonde vampire. It looks so good they actually put her on the cover of the Shout Factory new slip cover, with her fangs out, even though she's only in it briefly. But but it's a cool look, and she looks really really good. She's got fangs. When she comes up to the Baron, I guess we should talk about the pub scene first because at first he's doing this narration,
Hmm.
and then it cuts to the pub in town, and they're in there drinking heavily, and then there's like some one guy goes out to take a pee, and then hear him screaming, and then suddenly the door opens, and there he is standing there with like blood coming out of his neck.
Yeah.
That was probably a pretty gruesome scene back in 1970. But if you think about if you're sitting in there in a pub drinking, that would be like the last thing you want to see.
It is because the ideal that we see here is that everyone in that town, in that area, are having a good time drinking at the pub, kind of oblivious of the fact that their town is shrouded by this gloom that surrounds them from a vampire, of which Hartog is trying to rid the town of the vampires that have cursed that whole area. So when that guy screams, it's it's shocking because we hear I think she's a barmaid who screams out loud when she goes to the door to open it, and his body's just standing there at the door. Uh,
Yeah.
and then of course, we go back to Hartog as he watches the vampire return to her grave, but because of the whole rules with the shroud, she can't go back to sleep or have a restful sleep, or he says some specific words like I can't exactly remember right now, but uh
Yeah. I did write down one of his lines here, which
okay.
you're not quite there. It's not about that, but so basically, she can't sleep because of the shroud. But
Yeah.
but something else. That's another like a vampire rule that's established that the vampires, when they bite people, they don't turn them into vampires. They kill them. That kills them when they bite them like that and drain their blood.
Hmm.
Um, but then so what he says, he's waiting for it. He's like, a vampire could be destroyed by only a stake through the heart or decapitation, throwing out two more rules. I waited sword in hand, and that's when she comes in and he sees her, and she's this beautiful blonde woman. And he's there because he says in the narration too that they killed his daughter, and he's there to get revenge on them killing his daughter. But
Yeah.
she has like a I don't know what kind of dress. Like you can see her cleavage pretty good, and then she just rubs up against him, like bust up against him. And at that point, it was important for this, like any character, which you see this a lot later. Like they're very strong characters. Baron Hartog is there to avenge his daughter's death, but this blonde vampire is so seductive that suddenly he's caught in her trance, and there's nothing he can do but be her acolyte
Hmm.
until he has a cross around his neck, which is another rule that's established right then, which makes her recoil.
And these rules will come in place later on in the film, because one of the things I liked is there is kind of a repetition on certain actions that happen in this film, which makes it real. Like some of the stuff that we're seeing now is set up for later stuff, especially when Hartog returns to the actual driving force to the story towards the end.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's an amazing sequence when after she touches him or touches his cross, it breaks that pull she has on him, and she's able to, or he's able to decapitate her with his sword.
yeah.
And that, what were you about to say on that
Yeah,
one?
no, no, it's a cool scene though. And then he cuts her head off, and then her head looks it's a little suspect. It looks a little fake, but they got it out of focus on the floor, and then the whole opening credit sequence
Yeah.
goes over the head on the floor out of focus.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, and
Yeah,
and that's how the movie begins.
yeah,
The movie literally begins with a decapitation of a vampire. They're not trying to hide anything in this movie. Hammer Studios has done so many vampire films. Why try and hide it? You've seen it already. Uh, let's get it out of the way. But what they try to do is change the rules for this kind of new trilogy of films based on the Carmilla story. I don't know, or I don't remember because I have read the story, but I don't know how closely to the rules from that story that this movie adheres to. I wish I had
Yeah.
time to reread the book, but I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't read it either, but I think the biggest rule change that sticks out is that they can typically walk out during the day. The vampires can.
Mhm.
They do seem to be a little. The sun does kind of aggravate them a little bit because there's a part in the film where Carmilla is outside and she's wanting to be in the shade, but
Yeah.
it does seem to aggravate them maybe a little bit, but it doesn't destroy them like it does in the other Hammer vampire movies.
Well, it makes more.
Hampire. That's
Yeah.
that's a good like the Hampire movies.
Well, it makes for a much more interesting and different story when you're watching this. These are definitely much different than the Dracula films where he was destroyed by sun in those films. So seeing our female vampire in this film walk out in the daylight, I can't remember if the other vampire, the Man in Black, walks in the daylight or
I
not.
don't think you see I would assume the Baroness is also a vampire, but we don't know that for sure. She may
Oh,
be
that's
just be
right.
an acolyte or something.
Yeah,
There's like yeah, so that Man in Black character who um he appears throughout the film and kind of at the beginning you see him in a scene interacting with some other people, but most of the time he just it cuts to like a random close up of him.
yeah, he's just sitting on the horse or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, just he's like observing. He's like an observer throughout the whole film. So when you're watching this film, this mysterious man in black who obviously looks like he's like maybe a lead vampire controlling stuff is just chilling.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
Apparently Christopher Lee was offered that part and turned it down.
Interesting.
But from what I read about it, but this I like from what how they handle that character in this film, which I'll talk about it more when we get further into it.
Mhm.
I really think they should have done something with it other than him just hanging around watching. It just seems like a it.
Waste.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, it just because of how many times they show him, and
Oh, I
he does interact in the first part of it in the next scene after this when it goes to present day time, which is sometime between 1810 and 1820. But he does actually come into this ball, the party that they have, and it does interact with the Baroness briefly,
hmm
which kind of makes him not that shadowy figure as much as he would appear because he is somebody who does interact some, but then he doesn't anymore the rest of the film.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point to go to. I mean, this film opens up with a big, elaborate ball event being held by the general played by Peter Cushing. General, what's his real name? General. I just called him General the whole time.
Spilsdorf.
Okay, that's why I
Yeah,
call that's
so
why I
yeah,
called him General.
I would suggest calling him the General for now on. That's a really goofy last name. I think it's almost a joke intentionally, but I really think it is. I forgot I didn't write it down, but the two words Spills and Dorf actually mean something goofy. I don't know why they decided to do that. It's that but this fancy, and he's also at this fancy ball party. He's actually wearing his like a red military like uniform, which looks pretty cool, but it's very formal ball. The people there they're doing formal dances that they've clearly practiced for a long period of time. It is his niece's birthday, Laura. We also meet who turns out to be really the protagonist of the film, Emma, and her dad, briefly Roger Morton, and they're leaving the party. But it's almost like a almost had to rewatch it to even like I know they were there at that party, and it's like really randomly they're just leaving right when it first comes into the party.
Yes.
But it's kind of cool that they did and they basically have her interact briefly with Laura, like they're friends and they know each other. So it's kind of a cool little thing when you watch it the second time.
Yes, I will agree because when I rewatched it this time recently, I like the fact that this film is broke the way it is broken up because this first part of the film really follows the general and his daughter, and then
Right.
it follows separately Emma and Morton.
Yeah, like her dad, Mr. Morton or
Mr.
Roger
Morton.
Morton's his name.
Is so breaking it up like that is very interesting because our main antagonist, you know, Carmilla slash Marcella, or
Yeah. So
Carmel.
all of her names are
Yeah.
acronyms of I think her Marcilla I think Marcilla is the name on the tombstones. That would be the real name. But the book is called Carmilla, but she's Carmilla for most of the movie because the
Mhm.
second house. That's why I guess that's why they used her name as Carmilla in the second part of the movie. It's really tough talking about the character because she goes by so many different names during the course of the film. I think it's an alien aliases because
Alias
because the first place she goes to the general's estate, she goes by which one is it
Marcella.
Marcilla. So her real name is Mircalla then, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Miracala. See,
No, Marcilla's she goes by Marcilla at first. Her
yes,
real name is Mircalla. At the second place, she goes by Carmilla, which makes it so they don't know for a while that she's at the second place because she's going by a different name.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it may be confusing, but when we're talking about this, we'll
It's
kind of
less confusing when you're watching it because she's on
yes,
screen.
she's on screen. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like it's pretty obvious. Ingrid Pitt plays her, and she's at this party, and she looks like her dress is really cool. She's got this red necklace on, and she has this like kind of crown thing on in the party at the fancy dance party.
and she comes in after Emma and Morton have left, so obviously they don't know who she is when they
Yeah,
go later in the story.
yeah. That's another plot thing because they had to get them out of there for
Yeah,
so they don't recognize her later.
they don't recognize her later, which is very interesting because of the fact that once Marcilla and the is it the Duchess? Is that who brings her in? The
Well,
Duchess,
it's the Baron, the
Baroness,
Countess. I was calling her Baroness. Her name
Countess.
is
You
Countess.
did, yeah.
Countess.
You had me calling her by
Baroness.
name,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Countess. So the Countess introduces her to the general, and she manages to convince the general that she has to leave, and wanted to know if her daughter could, or her niece, or however it really is, could stay
Yeah.
with them until she returns.
Yeah, that's when the Man in Black comes in, which is kind of goofy. The Man in Black kind of looks goofy to me in this. He's not as mysterious as they want him to be.
He doesn't have, yeah, he doesn't have that Christopher Lee presence like
no, no,
if it had been like a Christopher Lee like actor.
yeah, he's got like an okay cloak on, but he's got like it's kind of black, and he's also got like a red. Um, I guess the cloak's red, and most of the rest of his suit's black, and that red just is looks goofy to me. And he's got like some kind of I'd assume it's a black wig on too, which
Yeah,
under a hat. So it just he's kind of there, but not quite there. But he comes in and he looks more goofy than most of the time when he comes into this ball party in the friggin' really lighted room, and he talks to the Countess, and that's part of their scheme. So he's all like part of they're kind of con people. They have to con the general into letting her stay. And for he comes in there and the scheme is she says that he just came over and said that one of her friends is dying and she's got to go immediately, but Miracala is having or Marcilla is having so much fun that she'd hate to just take her out of there. And so that's how she scams her into staying there.
yeah. The back in this day, I'm assuming that people were much more gullible to those type of strangers. Like they'd never met them before, but yeah, you can stay with me while you go deal with that.
Well, I think they put up appearances because she calls herself the Countess, and so it's almost like he has to pretend like he knows her. And then yeah, and then but another thing we didn't point out was the guys at the party when Marcilla comes in, they all turn around and they're very impressed with her. It's also introduced like kind of the male hero of the film, Carl,
Carl.
is there dancing with Laura, and then she thinks Marcilla's just staring at the two of them, it seems, but she thinks he's looking at him. Well, she's really looking at Laura, who Carl's kind of suspicious of it too. He's like, kind of looks like she's looking at you and not me.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind that that's a really interesting scene because Carl is the only man in that room that is not taken with Marcella at this point.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is why he's not recognizing as her staring at him, but her staring at Laura. Um, and then of course the scene kind of ends like that, and it keeps the audience thinking, "Oh, yeah, that's where we start seeing that this vampire is going after the females and not so much the males who she couldn't care less about."
yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that she sees the females as the easier prey because as you see later when she does like go after like the guys, it's a little bit harder for her to do it. Um, but I do think that she does see them there, especially with these type of women who are like these high class, high society women are somewhat they have a good spirit. Like the Laura character does seem to be having a fun time, but since
mhm,
they're kind of prim and proper and haven't really been through much, they are quite weak, especially when she starts draining their blood, and she can do that, and then it's kind of realistic that they're getting sick and and then she kind of has to wait on them. But I don't think the character Marcilla is necessarily gay, or I think she just is there seeking prey. She's trying to like she's looking for her next meal, and it's just easier for her to go after the women.
I would think that too, but she ends up wanting to spend more time with the Emma
Yeah,
character
Emma. Yeah, but yeah,
and
you make a
with
good
the other
point.
one.
Yeah, because later, yeah, but I don't know if it's. I think she does start to feel for her in a way that's not what she expects.
Yeah.
I think she makes a mistake of keeping Emma alive for too long before killing her because he starts to become attached to her. I think that's kind of what she starts to become very emotional and attached to her and doesn't necessarily want to kill her as it gets further into it.
Mm.
But it's hard to say because that seems to be what's happening. But since it's never kind of quite followed up on, we don't know exactly what her intentions were with Emma. If she was just going to eat her later, or if she was going, and literally eat her, if she was going to do that, or if she was just going to take her with her and try to like keep her alive and make her like her pet for from then on. It's,
Yeah, well, the funny thing is she doesn't make Laura her pet. Or yeah, so that's why I say that.
yeah,
Laura is just her a meal, and then she goes off and repeats the same uh formula again, but with different outcomes when it comes to Emma's character. But that is an interesting question that we can watch when we rewatch the movie again, looking for clues to all that. Because there has to be more than just wanting to drink their blood as a motive for Carmilla, what she does. This is like a very elaborate setup just to drink the blood of very aristocratic young ladies.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, and it's a very like puts her into kind of a dangerous position too. I mean, especially when she does it a second time. But yeah, I mean, what's the point? What's the point if you want to? I mean, maybe something's better with these aristocratic ladies. Maybe there's some better blood. They've been taken care of better.
Well, it sort of makes for a much more enjoyable film going experience than if she had just been taking like the local barmaids as her feeding frenzies.
Which she does do that, and I mean, that's something that happens in the second part where instead of killing Emma, she goes out into town and starts killing other people. And that, I mean, yeah, and maybe, I mean, we say that. I know the actress herself said she didn't feel like the character was gay, but she definitely does attach to Emma, whether she's gay or bi or whatnot. But there's definitely like that all happens because she likes Emma and she doesn't necessarily want to kill her all the way. Because instead of killing her, she does go out and feed on other people.
Mm.
Uh, But I don't. Yeah, I really think it's like a. It could maybe. I don't know. I don't know if we have a definite answer for whether she's gay or what. But she definitely is. At the very least, she's bi.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I said. My opinions have always been that she can have anyone she wants. She may prefer the ladies, but she can have anyone she wants. And when men get in her way, like what's his name towards the in the third act,
The butler character.
yeah, the butler character, when he gets in the way, she'll use him. She'll
Yeah.
yeah, she'll use him with no problems, you know.
So yeah, I mean, I think that it's. I mean, yeah, but that's pretty interesting what happens with that. But he does seem when she does seem like she because how quickly she does dispatch of him. It does seem like he was a little too aggressive for her. That she was like, I gotta just take this guy out because he was definitely she definitely seemed like she was he wanted her in a different way than she actually wanted to be taken. You know.
Mm, yeah.
But back to the
Back
earlier part of the film with Laura,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so
Let's go back to Laura's because that's that's the setup for
yeah.
what will happen eventually with Emma. So with Laura's character, obviously she becomes attached to the Marcilla.
Marcella. Before that happens, when one kind of hilarious thing that happens, like Marcella goes out on the walk, still at the ball party, the fancy ball, and she goes out in the yard and she sees the man on black on a horse, and you see that he has fangs, so he's definitely a vampire, and it's I don't know what to make of it exactly, but it's a confirmation that he's a vampire and she's a vampire. We don't know if the Countess is or not. She could just be an acolyte,
Mm-mm.
but that's
You know,
yeah.
well, no, it's interesting you point that out because one of the things I always thought about this film is that she was just an acolyte. And I don't think I really noticed until the rewatch that her character it can also go out in the daylight, but she doesn't really like it that much. So I don't know exactly where it fits in with having someone like the Countess as an acolyte who's watched, because normally they might watch over the vampires during the day, but if the vampire can go out during the day, what is their purpose really?
Well,
Um,
when she helps to get her into the places, I mean, she's
yeah,
a
but then she leaves.
yeah,
So it's very interesting. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong; it's a very
yeah.
interesting concept for vampire film. This whole concept is cool. Like the ideal that these vampires are setting up this whole like sting operation to
Yeah,
get what they want.
right.
Um, and it's
It's not,
very subtle. It's very
yeah.
subtle.
Well, it's not that subtle. I mean, they do a ridiculous like crash with their carriage to make the second thing. But
Yeah,
something
but
yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead. I do want to point
but
out
what I would
something
say,
else.
I say subtle in that they're not, they're not just leaving random bodies all over the place. When they kill, it's under the impression that the young ladies that die are get anemia and they die of weakness and frailty and not vampires, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So they were able to so that's how they're able to get away with it
mhm.
too for a little bit. It's something I was going this is something I just thought of, but the man in black, we don't know who he is, where he came from, but it's quite possible that he's been around a long time. He could have been around during the Twins of Evil, and he could have been the vampire in the earlier part of the film where we find people dying and we don't know who did it. So that's a possibility that it came from him, but it's not established for sure. But that's just an idea that kind of I thought of just now.
Well, it's interesting, and it's interesting for me because I haven't seen the second part of this trilogy. I've only seen the prequel, I've seen Twins of Evil, and I've seen this one. I've still never seen the second one, so I don't know if the Man in Black is in there, or if he's just in this film per se. I am hoping that there's some type of connective tissue with that because one of my big issues about this film is that the Man in Black shows up so often. I'm wanting there to be something for that character to do, but he doesn't do anything. He just
Yeah. I haven't seen the second one either, but that's what I was saying earlier. Like it gets to the point of being ridiculous the way
yeah.
it keeps cutting to it cut to him way too many times. It's kind of cool at first, and then it kind of gets to the point and there's a very specific point which I'll point to out when we get to it where it becomes like, okay, you showed him one time too many. You just you,
Well,
but there's
it's funny because you're watching the film and it seems like every time Carmilla goes outside, the Man in Black is there. every time she's gone towards her victim, the man in black is watching. And so he shows up so often, it just seems very ridiculous. And he's on horseback. He's always
Yeah,
outside on a
hanging.
horse. And
Yeah.
I found that very, and I don't think I found it hilarious the other times I saw the movie. I saw the movie. This time I just happened to find it freaking hilarious.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's too much. You know, he really shouldn't
yeah,
be out there like all the time. He does seem to come at night, and I don't know if he's maybe a type of vampire that can't be out during the day, but he does seem to draw her to the window. Like she looks out the window at him. It's almost like a which she actually does the same thing. She comes to the window and sees her, and which makes her go out in the yard and look at Laura through the window. It's like, let's cool it. Yeah, let's go out in the yard and stare at people through the window, you know. So a lot of this, a lot of that sort of stuff, of course, it comes from the original the Dracula 1932 with Bela Lugosi because he did that in that one. But it does remind me a lot of Dark Shadows too. A lot of this film reminds me of Dark Shadows, especially when it has it shows a lot of exteriors of these really big houses, and then it shows that like just the way that the close-ups of some of the actors are done. It kind of something about it reminds me a lot of Dark Shadows, just a Dark Shadows with nudity and some, you know, just like with not being on TV, just that with a little bit more to it. But
interesting.
yeah,
So going back to Laura and the general has been noticing that Laura has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and she has become extremely attached to Marcella.
she's calling herself Marcilla here. I don't.
Marcella. Yeah, see, I'm
Yeah,
getting confused now. Marcella.
yeah.
So she's become
Whatever.
really attached to Marcella, which kind of frustrates the general, but not enough yet
It
for
frustrates Carl too because she's all up on his girlfriend, you know. So he's
yeah, Carl's an interesting character now that you bring him up. Um, because he works for the general, I guess doing odd they mention exactly what he does, but it kind of seems like he just does whatever the general wants him to do. But he's taken up with Laura, and it frustrates him when he's been cut off from her by Marcilla. Um, and
so yeah, yeah. And then he's like, yeah. So he's in pretty thick with the general. I think
yeah,
he's trying to get with Laura. He's trying to like you know, the way that they did it, that's the way they were doing it back then. It's just really an appropriate way of doing things. He's trying to court her the
yes, that's a
proper
good way.
way. Yeah, he's trying to court her the proper way, and he's working on her dad first, trying to get him on board with the whole thing. And it's this Marcilla shows up and just like cock blocks him, you know.
Jesus. That I mean that's essentially yes. Yeah, that's what happened. But yeah. Uh because yeah.
I mean, he's put a lot of work into this, you know.
He has, and you think that he'd be a little bit more defensive against Marcilla, but he's not. He kind of
Well,
is
he's
very
trying,
proper.
yeah. He's trying to
He's
be
very
polite,
proper.
and he's trying to do everything the right
Yeah, he's
way.
trying to do everything the right way.
But that changes after this, though, going
Oh yeah.
on. Yeah. But she has this the victims have these nightmares. And it's kind of interesting what happens in the nightmare.
Yes. Oh yes. Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's the way it's described when they wake up. She's like, it was a cat, a huge cat. It was choking me. It's sometimes I think earlier you do see it, the kind of engulf her, and then she wakes up and the cat's. I mean, she doesn't see like a real cat, but that she does in the dream she sees the cat there, and that's when she wakes up and like Marcella's out in the yard, out in the lawn, doing her weird stuff, staring out her window. But what do you make of the cat in the dream? And
I was going to ask you that, especially considering when it later is revealed from Emma exactly the entire content of the dream. For this part of the film, we only get a part of what the dream actually is, and the fact that it's a cat, I don't know. I thought that was kind of odd choice. I've always thought it was an odd choice to be a cat. Um,
well, I got I see two possibilities to it.
Okay.
Um, well, I guess in a way there's three, but I mean, the question is, does she really turn into a cat? We never see her turn into a cat. Maybe it's just doing it only in the dream, but the cat is maybe symbolic of something.
Mm.
Like you call like a cat like a pussy cat, for instance. So it could have a symbolism of that. I don't know if it's that quite that, but it could be that because it's this sexual engulfing her.
That's very interesting. I don't know. And I haven't read anything about this movie in regards to that. I found it a visually interesting story that's being told. Um, because the cat's strangulating her.
Yeah,
Um, and then of course she wakes up screaming, and the scream is like wakes up everyone in the house. It's so frightening, just the way she screams, and she suffers from these nightmares repeatedly, almost like nightly. A lot of the times, when you're watching the film, they're gonna have the man in black right outside the door, as though he's like controlling the dreams or whatever that she's having. That's another thing why I say he shows up way too often. If we see the character having a dream, either Laura or Emma, there's gonna be like a cut to the man in black outside on the horse, like
right. Yeah,
he's some type of puppeteer masquerading these nightmarish dreams. I After watching the film, I more or less want to go with the idea that it's really Marcilla who's controlling these dreams. But then, of course, then what the hell is the Blade of Black doing there? And you
yeah.
it,
I mean,
it's
he does
weird.
seem to be. He does seem to be a higher up vampire than Marcilla, but because
Oh
he
yeah,
does come to her window and call to her. It kind of in some parts of the film it makes her look like maybe she's tries to make herself out to be a victim. She's clearly a predator, but she tries to make herself out like she's also a victim being controlled by this other force.
hmm
So, which I mean, it never makes her look very sympathetic. I mean, but it definitely makes her performance very, very like interesting. The levels of her performance in what she kind of goes through. It's almost like a withdrawal thing further into the movie. But the dream's interesting too, with the way that it looks. That's another thing that reminds me of Dark Shadows too. Just seeing the dream, if you see it that one time. But it's I mean, I think more than likely, I don't have an answer for it as far as like I don't know who's doing it. I would assume, like you said, it's probably Marcilla, and if she could just be a controlling dream. I'm not sure exactly what the cat represents, or if she's really able to turn into a cat. We never see her shapeshift other than the dream,
Well, the only time we ever see her do anything is that she can disappear. At one
right?
time towards the end of the movie, she just disappears.
She you see her do it earlier, but you think that it's like a I think it's a camera trick, like it's like because you see her disappear in the cemetery, she just like fades out. Um, but you see it's very to make it like painfully obvious that she can do that later on. She can teleport. She teleports from the house to her grave. And that's what she does too at the beginning after the end of the first act because like once she the rules are kind of weird, which I think we find out more rules later on about it, but they say that I think we should talk about the rule later when the Baron Hartog actually mentions it, but here what happens with Laura is they basically call this doctor in and he starts saying that she's anemic and that's all it is. She needs to eat some more iron and red meat.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're drinking some port wine during that scene in their hammer fashion. It's the only time I think they do that in
But
this one.
remember, we had conversation. We had that in the conversation where they're always when they have scenes like this where they're always drinking port wine or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's like port wine or brandy, but they're drinking the
Brandy,
port
yes.
wine. Yeah, they're drinking the port wine in that scene. And then this is just a note on Marcilla's dress. It doesn't really mean anything because I was looking for it to mean something later on, but she's got this very green dress. Um, during this scene where she goes to see Laura, where Laura's getting really close to death. And I thought maybe that was what she wore when she got close to death, but she later on she wears it again, and it's not really the same scenario.
Mm.
But it's a cool looking. It's a really that green colored dress is very interesting choice. That's when Carl shows up and they turn him away, and eventually it gets so bad that Laura's dying, and Carl comes there, and then he actually goes back to the village to get the doctor. He's worried
Yeah,
about Laura, and then in the bed, so Laura's in bad shape, and then the wife comes to the room and she tells the general comes in there and the wife tells the general that Marcella's not in her room because before they've gone to check on Marcella and she doesn't answer the door. So, but they're like, okay, just let her sleep. But this time he's like, the wife's like, Laura's dying and Marcella's missing. And he's like, where the devil is she?
yeah.
And then she suddenly just appears, like Marcella appears in the door right there. And she's like, "Oh, I was in the chapel praying, or some nonsense, you know." Like she was really praying
But
in
she's
the
gonna go
chapel,
into a
yeah.
chat.
And then she says a very bizarre line, which is cool. She's like, "It is daylight now. She is dead."
Yeah,
And then Carl and the doctor return. And they go to her. The general's like, "Laura, no, no, no." And then the doctor inspects the body. And then they find the two fang marks above her breast. And then that's when the general starts calling for Marcilla. He's definitely thinks that she's involved with it at that point. And then he's calling for her. She's completely disappeared. That's when it cuts to the graveyard. She's back at the Karnstein Castle, and then she dissolves.
yeah.
And that's the first time we see her dissolve. And it's not something I think at that point that it really registered as she can really teleport or dissolve, but that's what happens there.
Yeah, I think that later in the film when she actually disappears, it registers a little bit more than that. I had
Yeah.
forgotten that that's what happens there when she goes back to the castle and we see the Karnstein grave. But it's interesting because we hear the general screaming her name out for a while there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's cool. It's really some really cool shots because it cuts outside. You see the Karnstein Castle. You see this outside, and you just hear him calling her name over all of that. It's like this
Yeah.
wind blowing. It's a cool little sequence.
And, and that's how the first kind of section ends for this film because then
Right.
we switch focus.
Well, yeah. One thing we did miss, I just remembered it. We got like a really probably the first like look at some boobs in that part of it because right before she does that bite mark to Laura's breast, she comes in there and starts kissing Laura and then moves her shirt down. You see her breast, and that's when she goes down to bite it.
Mhm.
So
Well,
that's a
also keep in mind, since we're talking about those scenes where there's early nudity, there is a really like a girls scene where Laura steps into Marcilla's room and it just loves her outfits. And Laura is used to wearing the corsets and all that type of stuff, but she gets to wear Marcilla's outfits, and Marcilla talks her into undressing right in front of her and putting on one of her outfits. Uh,
well, that's actually Emma, not Laura, for that part.
Emma,
Yeah,
shit,
because that's when they go to Emma's house, and that's what happens there. But yeah, it's
are
yeah.
you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure because that's when because they go down and they talk to Mr. Morton and
That's
the
right. See,
yeah
because these sequences
yeah
happen so similar, I did. You were absolutely right. I did get confused. I
but
went
yeah
that scene right there. I was like, oh shit. Okay, yes, yeah,
but
you're right.
what's weird is like when you're watching this, it does seem like Laura is going to live a lot longer.
Yeah,
It's kind of jarring when she dies because you're like, oh wow, I thought that she was going to be the vampire lover, you know, and then she just friggin' dies and. When she goes back to her grave, we find out later on that after she kills somebody, she's got to go back to her grave and hang out for a while for whatever reason.
yeah. We're not told why, but Hartog knows all the details, and some of that becomes more clear. So when she disappears from Laura and the general's house, and they're back at Karstein Castle, that makes everything clear for when Hartog and them know that that's where she's gonna go when she disappears from Emma and Morton's place. Uh, I don't think I ever caught on to that until I rewatched it. I started to pick up on those type of little details. There's a lot of good setup for stuff that repeats itself in this film, so that each section, even though it's different people, you get a it's very similar what happens, but you get more details on some of the reasons why, and you get more of the mythology that they're building, because this is stuff that is not relevant to any of the other vampire films. It's only this series of vampire films, and this film
Yeah.
in particular.
Right, right. And it's kind of in some ways I'm not sure. Sometimes I think I can answer the questions of why things are a certain way, but it does seem like odd that they say in order she has to get a victim and then she's got to go back to her grave. But then she does have other victims where she doesn't go back to her grave. Maybe it's got to be a specific type of victim for her to be completely like good with, I don't know.
Hartog says later on in the film that when she has her fill, she has to return to her grave. Now, unfortunately, we don't know when they have their fill actually really occurs, because in the opening sequence, the very first vampire just kills one person and then returns to her grave.
Yeah.
Whereas
Right, right.
Marcilla, Carmilla is like, oh, she's snacking on multiple people before she has to go back on her grave, you know.
Well, that's what I think that even though it's not explicitly said, I think it has a lot to do with her trying to save Emma is why it goes on for so long at Emma's and why it's not like as quick as Laura. But
Yeah.
but again, there's a lot of stuff that's really said explicitly in this film for them not to explicitly say that. They like kind of leave some stuff open to interpretation while like really just sitting there and just like exposition dumping a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I kind of like go between this film being very well thought out and very clever to some of it may have been on the go changes. So I don't know. I don't. I'm kind of torn between it. Is it clever or is it just? It's a hard call on that. I don't know. What do you
It
think?
is a very hard call, because so they create so many rules that are different than other vampire films. So, and we don't know why. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where we just go with the flow with it, and we either buy into it or we don't buy into it. Like, I don't always buy into the whole shroud thing. It's interesting. It just seems it's kind of like the garlic thing with vampires. I always thought that was hokey. I was like, garlic, really? Dude,
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
such
Yeah, yeah.
that
Garlic
was
is
just
kind of
hokey.
around. I've always liked the garlic stuff. I never thought about not liking it, but now that you mention it, it is kind of like a random thing. I guess just because the smells so strong. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Wolf's Bane, because at least Wolf's Bane's called Wolf.
I don't know, but I do think that sometimes these vampire films like to pick and choose which of the kind of the originating rules they want to follow and when they want to create something new. Um I don't think that the whole shroud thing adds much really to the overall story that you're telling. I think kind of the concept alone, where these vampires are kind of like getting weaseling their way into high society to manipulate people and to get their fill of the upper class, is a much interesting ideal to me than this whole shroud thing.
Yeah, I don't think you needed the shroud, but it's like they left out things like they have to return to their coffin at
Yeah.
night, but apparently she has to return to her coffin at some point. For you know, at some point she does have to return to her coffin apparently, but it's like not a very the only specific time is after she's had her fill, she returns to her coffin.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, I think yeah, the shroud thing is kind of an odd
I mean,
thing to
don't get me
add to
wrong,
it.
it's visually cool in the very opening sequence, but
Yeah.
to be honest with you, we don't really see it much again in the film. Like, I don't even remember if Mark Carmilla is wearing the shroud when she's back in her coffin when they find her at the very end.
But
I
she is.
Is she?
Yeah, which they've actually got it around her. It's not over her face, but they actually move it down
Oh,
because they,
okay.
they move it down to get to her heart. But yeah, it's she's just snuggled up with a shroud. It's like a snuggy blanket, you know?
Well,
But
well,
it's-
then now we go into the next kind of set of story with Morton, and I think that this one starts with is it starts with the Morton and
yeah,
the Duchess and Carmilla are in the wagon. Is that how this one starts off? I almost
no, no, it's something. There's something weird happens here. Now, like this is like another thing where sometimes I question like the movie a little bit because I'm like, did they add kill scenes into this film after the fact because they thought that it needed it, kind of like they did with the Friday the 13th, like we got to have one every 7 minutes or something. But first thing it does is it reintroduces Emma and Morton and her dad. They talk to Carl. He comes to tell him what
that's right.
happened. But then that's during the day. But then that night, this is the random scene I was referring to. There's a woman in the woods with a basket of potatoes randomly, and then something starts chasing her. She falls down a hill, and then she's attacked by what appears to be a woman in a white dress who is clearly Carmilla, but for some reason it doesn't show that it's Carmilla. So the question is, what's up with that scene?
Yeah, I almost forgot about. You're absolutely right. I didn't almost forget. I did forget about that scene because I thought it was very odd. Uh, I guess
So
they needed some type of transitional period between when Carl goes to tell Emma that Laura's dead, Emma and Morton that Laura's dead, and that the general has left his castle to go somewhere else for a while after his niece's death. That just sets up the fact that they've gone somewhere. He's gone. The general's gone somewhere, and we find out later what he's been up to after his daughter
But
niece's.
he does say in that scene that he went to go see his friend the Baron Hartog, which
Has he?
yeah,
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't pick up on that.
I know you have to really be know the character's name in order to pick that up because you don't casual viewer. The first time I watched it, I didn't know that. Taking notes on it, I'm like, he just said the Baron Hartog. That's where he's going, and that's what he comes back with him later on,
Yeah.
like a year later when he gets back. It's,
You know what? I don't think I picked up on it until I saw the Baron Hartog again. So I may have missed the fact that he said that that's where he's going is to his friend
yeah.
Hartog.
But this, so I think the random village kill is fine, but it's just the rules are kind of wonky. So I don't know if the rules are right or if this was an added scene to keep either transition or give the audience something like violent for during that time period. But this her going to town and feeding on these peasant women is maybe not as fulfilling as feeding on the aristocrats because she has to go back to her coffin after I don't maybe she has to go back after she kills this woman. I don't know.
Hmm.
But so then after that's when the carriage scheme stunt thing happens when the Countess and comes back in there and it's pretty elaborate how they wreck the carriage and some of those like some stuntmen on the horses that fall off and the whole and then the carriage comes apart and then the Roger Morton and his daughter Emma are out riding horses and then they come to their rescue and then she talks him she does the same thing she did to Peter Cushing's character the general earlier she gets him to let her stay at his house while she recovers from
Yeah.
her injury and the Countess whisked away, and that's the last time we see her in the film. So
Well, it's interesting the way this film does that with certain characters that you think might be important. The Countess and the Man in Black, you think they're going to have some type of more profound, um, you know, impact
yeah,
to the story. But
right,
this is literally the last time we see her, and
yeah,
she's like the instigator, the setup person for all of the stuff that happens. And the Man in Black is just in the background the entire film. He doesn't really do anything. Uh, uh,
yeah. Well, if they had a third, um, if they had a third person they were going to target, I'm sure the Countess would have been back with another elaborate plan to get her in there.
I
But
kind of
yeah,
see this whole setup as these are vampire grifters just playing playing a scheme on local people, and they'll keep doing it and keep doing it. Except what they're going after is not money; they're going after blood.
but this one's this part at the Morton house. That's when she calls herself Camilla,
Hmm.
and then almost right away we see the bathtub scene, which is the probably the most gratuitous nudity scene in it, where Camilla's in the bathtub and she stands up. We see her like completely nude from the back, and that's when the scene you were talking about earlier,
Yes.
when Emma she gets her to take off her clothes and try on the dress.
Yeah, which is funny because the first dress she puts on is obviously really big,
Y-
but Carmilla has plenty of dresses that will fit her, and that's what she talks her into doing. Not only getting a dress, but also getting out of the customary corset, and so that when she's dressed up in that outfit and they go down to dinner, Morton like, oh wow, this is my daughter now.
Yeah, yeah, he
Wow.
don't know what to quite think about it. At first, he's taken back, and he's down there with the governess, Mademoiselle, who's a fairly predominant character for the rest of the film for a while. But the dresses, Emma has a light blue dress, and Camilla has a red dress, and she's got that red necklace that's really pops.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the dad's like, wow, at first, and then he kind of smiles a little bit, but he don't know quite what to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh, well, at least he doesn't like chastise her for wearing that outfit and saying this out of style or it's a little bit too provocative or anything like that. Probably because Carmilla is standing right next to her, and he's probably,
yeah.
he probably thinks, "Oh, okay,
Well, she is that red dress is really high on Camilla, but the blue dress looks good on Emma too, but it's not I think the blue dress the way it is blue and it doesn't have that it's not red like the other one, so it's not quite as provocative.
yeah,
And then all this to do is just so they can have dinner, but these are really nice houses. They're like it's kind of like a Downton Abbey sort of scenario, like a lighter version of Downton Abbey, but both this house and the general's house are houses that have butlers and
servants and
maids
everything
and
else." Yeah.
servants. So they're pretty big houses.
Well,
Um,
the general did have a huge like ball dance ball event there too. So
yeah, his house is a lot bigger than the other guy's house, Mr. Morton's house. Yeah, a lot bigger, especially when you see it from the outside. But we don't spend as much time there as we do at this house.
no, no,
Yeah.
no.
So when they're at dinner, they kind of do a little thing. He comes up, the waiter. I don't even know what character this one is. One of the guys serving comes up to Camilla and asks her if she wants red or white wine, and of course she picks red, and a not so subtle push there.
Yeah, yeah. But she doesn't eat anything else, so
Yeah,
yeah,
you don't think she eats? I guess it doesn't ever show her eat, but you think she avoids eating completely?
but there's that one scene where she's asked if she wants anything to eat, and she says, no, I'm not hungry." I don't know if she says I'm not hungry, but she
Yeah,
says something to that effect. Um,
right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that because I mean, sometimes you don't know if vampires actually can eat food or not eat food, but she probably has to like not eat, I guess, during that scene going forward. She just drinks the wine.
yeah, who knows? These vampire films change that rule up so often you never can tell. And this movie changes up a lot of the traditional vampire rules. So who
Yeah,
knows?
it would be tough to fit in as a vampire if you couldn't eat, though, especially in this sort of thing, because the way that it's a big deal to eat with these big houses, they make a big to do out of it.
Yeah.
So it would be tough to avoid having to eat. And that night, the nightmare returns to Emma, so Emma starts to have the nightmare, and at this point, the Mademoiselle governess comes in and checks on her, and she's like screams like the other one, like Laura did. But then
Mhm.
she tells her about the dream, and then she says it was a cat. And then Mademoiselle's like, no, that was just Gustav the cat. And then there's actually a real cat in the room, comes walking in there. And it's funny that they use Gustav as the name because they later in Twins of Evil use that name for Peter Cushing's character, Gustav. You know, such an odd name. It's the
It's an odd
cat in
name for
this
a
one.
cat.
I wonder if it's a reincarnation of Gustav, Puritan guy, or maybe the name was passed down from that because this is a it happens after Twins of Evil.
Jeez. And then after that, um,
Yeah, so that's where the dad leaves. Like the dad, Mr. Morton leaves randomly to go for
his
business.
job, whatever
Yeah,
he does for money, whatever he does, he has to leave. It's like we get the impression he's not always at home. He just kind of comes home when he can, and and he goes back off to work or do whatever he does for a living. So
and then Carmela says a really awkward thing to him as he's about to leave. She says, "I will take care of Emma as though she were my own sister," and he's kind of like, "Okay, I guess, I guess, you don't really have to, but
yeah, she has a governess. She has people
yeah,
to take
yeah,
care of.
yeah." And that's then she becomes progressively sicker and
We see parallels to what happened to
yeah,
Laura at the very beginning. Um, with Emma at this point. It's strange because the longer they go, the less these women become like real characters because they get weaker and weaker, and then we don't see much of them.
right.
Um, like
Yeah.
you're thinking in the first half, Laura's going to be like a main character, but once she starts getting weak, she just is not like a main character, and we start seeing that same thing here. Um, which is interesting way to look at the film because at this point then we are seeing Carmilla as really one of the main characters in the film, almost as though this might be a film that's more catered towards her character than any of the other characters.
Yeah, yeah, definitely is because she's on screen in
The
all the
most.
parts. This there's a scene where like they're talking about Laura's death. Like I think she's in Laura's and she's in the bedroom with Emma, and Carmilla gets upset. She starts to kind of in some way she doesn't like hearing about the people that she's killed and how it's affected people. She gets like really upset about it. And then she tells Emma that she loves her and she says a very awkward thing to her again. She's like, I want you to love me for all of your life.
Hmm.
And then the Mademoiselle interrupts here. And the Mademoiselle is actually they actually go through these characters in this house because at this point she is kind of like the person who is on the dad's side, and she's the one who can stop this stuff from happening.
Hmm.
But it follows her for a little bit, while that's going on. It was kind of interesting that they do that. And then, like with all of them, she eventually turns the people into acolytes or familiars.
Yeah, because yeah, at first it's Mademoiselle, and then it's the
And the
butler,
butler,
which I can't
yeah,
remember his name.
it's Renton. It's the butler's
Renton,
name.
Renton.
Yeah,
It's interesting that if an obstacle gets in Carmilla's way, she more or less just takes control of them, turns them into a familiar, and then they're no longer in her way because both the Mademoiselle is a strong opposition to her until she becomes enthralled with Carmilla, and even Renton. Renton for a long time is more with the doctor and against anything else other than what the doctor says, uh,
yeah,
until he becomes enthralled with her as well. It's interesting that that's how Carmilla deals with the opposition to what she wants in pretty much everything, actually. We see it more in this house with Emma than we did in the Laura house, which makes it, this is one of the added dynamics in this section of the film that makes it interesting because we see all these other characters that are affected by what's going on, whereas in the first part, we don't see much other than the general himself being affected by what's going
yeah,
on.
yeah. And of course, the generals never like Mr. Morton. They never like have which they she could have done it probably because she could have done it. She almost gets hard hog, but they find out more information, so they're able to prevent her from seducing them as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's another random villager death. It cuts to a different woman who's also having the nightmare, and then again, Carmilla, which we assume is Carmilla, comes into her room and kills her, and then she's found dead with this big neck wound. And it's odd that we don't see Camilla's face. It's like, what are you trying to hide? At that point, you know.
I didn't
And
think
that, yeah, but after that scene though, it shows the Karnstein Castle graveyard again, and Carmilla walks in there and dissolves again. So I guess she does go back and recharge with her shawl, or is it not shawl? With the
Shroud.
shroud, yeah. She goes and recharges with the shroud. I don't know how long she has to recharge because she's back again at the Morton house, I would assume the next day. Um, but she does do that. They do have the random village thing happen, and then it's so
There's some the thing is there's some time period that kind of like this is not like the events in this film don't happen like over the course of like a couple days. It happens over like a extended period of time, because they both times, even with Emma and with Laura,
Laura.
they've mentioned that they've been sick for a while and suffering for nightmares for a while. We just
Yeah.
are not seeing how long or told how long that while is. So yeah, I mean, Carmilla could be that, if she's not killing Emma or Laura, she has to kill a random person and then go back to recharge, I guess.
Is that I don't think she was killing random people with Laura though. I think she just like they went for it. But I really don't think it was that long she was there. I think that when she's here, she stays longer.
Yeah,
But yeah, but there's a and after that, this is the scene where she's like the next day they're in town and a funeral goes by, like Carmela and Emma, and that's when this is the scene where Carmela is wanting to stay out of the sun.
hmm
But a funeral procession comes by from a villager that she had killed, and then Carmilla again becomes visibly upset and starts really dramatically starts saying "Stop it," and tells Emma that she's going to die, they're all going to die, or something like that. And
Yeah,
because
the
yeah,
bells that are ringing, as the procession is going by, or the music, it disrupts her. I got the sense that this reminder of like final death gets to her character, and she just tells Emma right off the bat that everyone dies. And
yeah,
it's the only time where I see kind of the mortality that this character is actually thinking about. Like, I don't think there's any other time where I see the Carmilla character thinking about her own mortality or other people's mortality at all. You don't really
she's
see much
yeah.
fear in her, but you do see that little bit of fear in her when she's screaming at Emma that everyone dies. Everyone, like,
Yeah.
it's like a constant. It's a reminder of that.
So,
Um,
yeah, it's a very
I
dramatic burst too when
Yeah.
that happens. And Emma in that scene does seem to be feeling a little better because I mean, I think she is healing in that and during that part because I don't think she hasn't really. I don't know if she feeds on them though. It's weird because the dream makes them sick. I don't know if because there's never any evidence of marks during the dream sequences. There's marks. They see the mark on her boot on above Laura's breast after she's dead. So I don't know. I don't know
I
if I don't know. I mean, I don't know if she must be actively feeding on them, but at the same time, when she bites into other people, it seems like they die immediately almost once she bites into their neck or whatever. Or
it's interesting because I assumed that the dreams came about while she was feeding on them.
yeah,
But you're
maybe
right.
she's just hiding. Maybe she's just got the fang marks and they're always in the same place, and she just goes back there for Laura and Emma.
I would assume so, but we're not giving any like real evidence of that, not that I'm aware of. That's just what I was assuming. I could be
Yeah.
very wrong
Well,
about.
well, actually, I'm looking at what happens next, and I think Emma does have bite marks on her breast. We see that pretty soon.
Okay,
That is what she's doing. So she is basically, for some reason, she doesn't kill Laura or Emma. She during these dream sequences, she's draining their blood, but she's having enough control somehow not to kill them all the way until she does.
she needs to. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's the next scene's like another provocative scene where Emma tells Camilla about her dream of the cat showing
Yes.
up in the bed, and then Camilla takes off Emma's shirt. We see her breast again, and then she kisses down, and she goes down all the way to her breast, and that's when she feeds again. And then we see our favorite silhouette of the man in black out in the yard. it's, but that's when the Mademoiselle comes in there, and she sees the bite marks. Carmela tries to act like it was from a brooch.
A
That
brooch.
look the brooch actually looks like it could do that because the way that it's got 2 points that are similar to where the marks are. And then she gets the Mademoiselle to follow her back. Camilla gets her to follow her back to their room, and she comes in there, and Camilla takes off all her clothes, and this is all done in shadow, and it's not shown. Apparently, they shot more stuff for that, but they made it simple, and they cut out that sexual part of it.
There's only so much of that they want to put in the movie.
Yeah, well, they probably couldn't get away with it through the censors, but I think it's actually more tastefully done. We didn't really need to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, unless we're like a Jean Rollin film or something, and then we do need to see it. But
Uh,
this one tried
remember, I
to,
saw this right after Vampiros Lesbos, and I was
yeah,
expecting more nudity
yeah,
and more sexual innuendos.
yeah, yeah.
I
You're
was
expecting,
ashamed.
yeah, yeah, and you may have gotten it had they not cut that out. You may have gotten a little bit more, but yeah. But then from then on, Mademoiselle is under her control. Um, and I guess maybe that comes from a bite. It's hard to say. I don't know if it comes from a bite or just having sex with her or what, because we don't see, we don't, but they're under her control from then on. It's like she is like her her thing, you know?
Oh, you're right. I don't know about that either. I didn't think about that. Neither Mademoiselle or Renton. How exactly? Maybe she's just using her mind control over them.
Maybe it's some kind of mind control. That's probably more than likely what it is, but it's hard to say how strong that is and what exactly she has to do to make that connection
hmm,
because could she do it to anybody, like because she doesn't do it to the Mademoiselle until she has to do it,
yeah,
and she actually takes her a while to do it to the butler as well. But that's when the butler kind of becomes the person in the house who has to step up
yeah,
because he starts noticing that Emma's sick, and then they all tell him not to worry about it. And then he goes to get the doctor, but then they tell him not to. So instead of going to get the doctor, he goes to the pub and gets drunk. But then he talks to the landlord at the pub, and then the landlord tells him about the other people in town starting to get sick, and they think it's a vampire. So at that point, he goes and gets the doctor, and then they bring the doctor back to the house, and then the doctor really becomes a driving force for a little bit.
yeah. Not
Try,
long, but
yeah,
yes,
yeah. But he brings the garlic flowers in there. The doctor at first is pushing back against the superstitious stuff like the garlic, but then he notices that Mademoiselle is acting odd, and he actually thinks that she is the vampire. Like Renton thinks
yeah,
that too, and so they're like, they think she's the vampire. So then he's like, all right, hell with it. Put the garlic flowers in here. And I think the doctor made a big mistake here. Was what he really needed to do. Him, the butler, and the maid all just needed to stay in the room with Emma overnight, I think, and then that would maybe have he would have not gotten killed because he leaves and he gets killed because of it. I don't know. What do you think of that? Like, because him leaving like that, it puts him like a target. But
well, yeah, the doctor is the science aspect, and he's kind of like an early version of our Van Helsing. He comes in and he puts like the he brings the like he knows it's a vampire, and he kind of gets them thinking on the right terms with the garlic flowers and putting the cross back around Emma's neck to protect
yeah,
her. And he tells Renton to not listen to anything anyone says other than what he tells them. And of course, Mademoiselle, once she sees the garlic flowers and the cross, she wants Renton to get rid of it, and he refuses. And then of course, eventually, Carmilla comes in, and when Renton refuses at first, that's when she takes her little powers to of suggestion over on Renton. and takes control over him. Um,
Right.
because he's now an obstacle that she has to get past, because she hasn't been able to see Emma because of this, the cross and the garlic flowers. um
Yeah, and I mean, it's actually like a pretty good bit of time with the Butler's involved with this. The dad
yeah,
even comes back, and the Butler's still like, he's still being a stand-up guy. He's not drinking anymore, and he's making sure that Emma's protected. He's having the maid stay in the room with her, and then that's the dad comes back, and the Butler tells him what happens, and then they actually go and get the landlord to because the Butler's like really pushing this story about the vampires, and he goes and gets the landlord, and the landlord convinces the dad about the vampires that
hmm
and he actually knows about the Karnsteins, and it's funny because he actually mentions the general that he needs to go talk to the general, and he mentions the Baron Hartog, and then they needed to go talk with them, and conveniently, once the dad leaves, he comes across the general and Baron Hartog inside of a carriage.
yeah,
They also he's actually going to look for the doctor. He goes to get the doctor, and then they got the doctor's corpse with him, with his neck torn open. It's pretty gruesome looking. And of course, Carl is with him too. And then instead of going back, you would think that they would be going to check out Emma, but instead of doing that, their actually goal is to go to the Karnstein Castle because
yes.
they know that that's where the coffin is. And that's when during that part, that's when the butler's still in charge at the house, and that's when she seduces him, or Melina
That well it
seduces him.
this is it's very interesting that this is when we kind of bring all these characters together when Morton is out looking for the doctor, and he comes across all the other important characters that return to the story again.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
all very conveniently, but I think it's fine. I really do. It was a surprise. It's a surprise when that happens, and you kind of think for a little bit, if it wasn't Peter Cushing, you would think that his character would never show up again. But it's Peter Cushing, so you think, when's Peter Cushing going to show up again?
yeah, yeah.
So you're anticipating his return. I had forgotten the Hartog returns, but then again, I wasn't until you mentioned that the general went to go see his friend Hartog, and so all these little elements and story things are finally clicking. And Hartog has told the general that they need to go back to the Karstein castle in order to be rid of and end the whole vampire menace, and so that no one's other daughters or nieces would become victim to them again, because he thought he killed them all except for the one. um
Yeah,
I do.
which yeah,
Yeah, well, I like the fact that now that all these characters are together, we get the full like story of Hartog and what happened. He relays everything that happened and what didn't happen. And I really, really liked that. It could have almost been its own separate movie if they'd done a prequel. They could have done a prequel with the Hartog character and his
yeah.
having gone through the castle to kill all the vampires and revealing that one escaped.
Right. Yeah, I mean that could have been its own movie, that opening sequence. It could have been. They would have had to cast somebody else's Hartog probably, but not that the guy. I mean, just because they had to make the guy look young
Yeah,
for the
make him
scene.
look younger.
Yeah, but
Uh,
something really cool happens. Like in this transition, because the general is like, our destination is the Karnstein Castle, and it cuts to the Karnstein Castle. It's night. There's a shot of it, and then you hear like a voice that we don't know who this voice is. Probably the Man in Black. I'm calling Mercala.
hmm
And it's just like this just disembodied voice just calling her name. And then she's looking out the window, hearing that voice, and you could tell her face is just full of sadness. And that's one of the times where it shows that she is being hearkened to by something that's not her. Some other force is in some way calling to her and making her make calling her back to the castle.
hmm
Right.
Well, that's the only time where I think, for me watching it, I was thinking it was the Man in Black because I think I needed the Man in Black to have a part of something in this story
Yeah.
because otherwise I couldn't really figure out what the purpose of him was. Like he's a guiding or a controlling force, but I'm not always sure what he gains from Carmilla. I just think that he was a guiding force, or he could have been her maker, or who the heck knows. I don't know
Well,
exactly.
if he's the one sending her to these aristocratic mansions for some reason, but again, if there is that reason, maybe it's unlikely to be explained in the second one. But I don't. Yeah, it's not explained, and it's unlikely to happen
Yeah.
in the second one, especially since we've seen the third one, and there's no like explanation there. Because if it was
No.
explained in the second one, it would be probably presented on screen. But when they get to the Karnstein Castle ruins, they get out of the group. It's like the general Hartog, and he's got a bunch of other servants with him too, and
Yep.
they got Carl with them. But we see the Karnstein crest on the front of the mansion or in front of the castle, and it actually zooms in on it. And the crest is a silver griffin, which is a half eagle, half lion, sort of crazy looking thing. But it was cool to see the crest, the Karnstein crest. And then they go in, and Hartog starts his monologuing, which I've got some of it here.
Yeah.
He says, I was determined to avenge the death of my sister. And he's doing all this while walking. It's actually a pretty well done sequence. And Peter Cushing's like listening to him, like the general's listening to him intensely. And he's like, I know where these monsters sprang from and what had to be done to rid the world of them. And then it shows some of the flashback.
Yeah.
He's like, and then you see her when she pressed her breast up against him, and he's like, but face to face, my limbs seem paralyzed. Here we saw this, but we weren't given the exact confirmation about what happened. He's like, I prayed to God to give me their strength, but then the moment came. When the moment came, I could not. The moment has been the nightmare all of my life. I was saved by the cross I wore, and then it shows her get burned by the cross. And
Yep.
Morton, the the dad of Emma, surprised. He's like, it was a woman? Like this whole time he was thinking the vampire was a man. And then Hartog says, a very beautiful woman. And it shows the flashback again. And then she tries to get actually that's when it cuts back to Carmilla, and that's when she's messing with the butler, getting him to seduces him.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, but it's like Hartog does all this
Monologuing.
monologue, and yeah, and then he comes, then it's like a more of it. He's like they, which is actually kind of cool. They walk up to one of the portraits on the wall of the Karnstein family, and he's like, they were evil in life and remain evil after death. And then we see this is a new flashback at this point
Hmm.
that we didn't show at the beginning. He actually shows him staking some of the other vampires that we didn't see before. He digs up their graves. And he says he got all of them, like you said before, but that of a young girl who, of course, is Carmilla. And he's like, but here's her sweet face. And it shows like a portrait that looks really nothing like her, but it is her. It is just a little bit like her. But
It's funny because it's the first thing I saw because of the way it ends with the picture, and we'll get to that later. I kept thinking that picture was very much like the picture of Dorian Gray.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Which it
uh
kind of is, though, I
yeah.
think.
And the thing is that this is very important because this is how the stories all come together because both the general and um Morton
Yeah,
realized that Carmilla is the same as Marcella. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah. Here's the dialogue from that. This is hilarious, actually,
oh, yeah, go
because
ahead. If you
yeah,
have the actual dialogue, go ahead.
yeah, because it's very simple. But he's like, this is this is her sweet face, and then Hartog says Mercala, which is probably her real name. The general says Marcilla, and then Morton says that girl is a guest in my house. Her name is Carmilla. And he's like, and my daughter is dying, and he starts trying to run away, and then they stop him, but instead
Stop him.
Carl instead.
And Carl.
Yeah, Carl. Yeah, but it's a funny transaction because you hear all three of her names in a row, different names, and they all realize what she's been doing. Um,
It
yeah.
really, yeah, it spells that out. So we all know, oh, this is the same person all three times. Uh, and so Carl gets sent off to go save Emma, while they stay at the castle to look for her grave.
It's funny when General actually addresses Carl when he's leaving, and he says hilariously, he's like Ebhart, which is Carl's last name. He's like, he knows every inch of this forest. He'll get to your house in half the time. So he's able to take a shortcut. Yeah, it's, it's like how many ways can there be, to get to the castle? I mean, to get back to his
Yeah,
house.
especially when you're on a single horse. You're not taking like any roads and stuff. You could probably just go right straight through and stuff.
And this is when it cuts to the Man in Black, which I think was the time it did it one time more than it needed to, and this is the worst one. He's sitting on his horse and he's smiling like a goofball and laughing this cackling goofy ass laugh, and it zooms in on him, and that killed the Man in Black for me.
That one killed you. Jeez.
Yeah, that was like, all right, you just like got really goofy with the dude. But
I,
it's almost like I mean I feel like what happened with that character, and then when they were shooting it, they just had him come outside and they shot like B-roll with him for one day and got him to do a bunch of different
yeah,
stuff. And they're like, in this one, they're like, I want you to just cackle and laugh and show your fangs. But yeah,
and they threw it in where they could.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
I kind of want there to be, or hope that there be, the original intent, since it was three films written by the same person, that there was some type of intent on this setup for this first film that probably did not get passed along through the other two films for some odd reason.
What? Yeah, I mean, it's the same writer on all of them. I don't know if they
Yeah,
gave up on the Man in Black or not, but I think the Man in Black didn't even have to do anything substantial. If it would have been nice if he just had another scene where he wasn't just sitting there on his horse acting like, being
yeah.
mysterious. It just like gave him something else to do other than that. Because he had a scene earlier in the film where he actually got to do something, and then after that it's just
A lot of scenes of him
yeah.
sitting on the horse.
Yeah. I mean, the only time it was cool was when he came outside the first time and you got to see that he had fangs, and then it was okay sometimes when he was hanging out outside, but they overplayed their hand with the Man in Black and without especially not giving him another scene. If they gave him something else to do at the end, it would, just something that
Yeah.
wasn't him just sitting there like laughing or whatever. It would have been better.
Well, next time I watch this film, you can have me counting how many times he shows up on horseback in the movie,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so I know the exact number of times.
Yeah, it's probably like 6 to 8, I would think.
It's way too many.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes like eye rolling after a while. It's kind of cool at first. I think after maybe the first 40 minutes, it's just like okay. But that time, more than anything, when he does that laugh, it was like wow,
Too much
okay,
for you.
yeah. Um, but then the rest of the film, they go there. It cuts back between then it just shows the butler dealing with Carmilla, and she ends up eventually killing him after she seduces him. And they go into that was like a scene where it's very like that whole thing with me. It seems like the actor playing the butler was enjoying that, making out with her way more than he needed to. Something
That's
about it was, yeah, I don't know. He's
that's
kind
what the
of a
scene called for. They needed
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that sexual
I
tension
mean,
because there's so much sexual tension in this movie between the females. We need that one little bit of sexual tension between the male and female in the movie.
yeah, yeah,
I don't think that that's really the case, but it's interesting for the Carmilla character because we realize that she can seduce pretty much anyone she wants to, and she could use them until their purpose has been fulfilled and then throw them away because her purpose is just to get access to Emma, and she's going to take Emma with her. Because I like this scene where
yeah,
she's like literally lifting Emma up to take her with her, and of
yeah,
course, Mademoiselle shows back up, wanting her to take her with her.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's a cool scene. Yeah, good.
and
Yeah.
like, dude, she like breaks down Mademoiselle. Take me with you. You know, I was like, damn, I feel sorry for her now a little bit.
Yeah.
But then of course that's when Carl shows up. And so it becomes a different dynamic of them trying to save, or he's trying to save Emma from the clutches of Markala.
Well, she does go over to Mademoiselle and goes ahead and ki takes her out of her misery
Yeah.
and kills her. Um, that being said, she's killed a bunch of people. She's killed like the butler, Mademoiselle, and in the middle of all that, we get the monologue from Hartog about the returning from the grave. And here's how that goes. They're out in the graveyard, and there's no shroud. And Hartog's like says, "Fix the box." And then later on, they bring this big box in there, and I guess it's almost looks like a coffin, but I guess that's just where all their vampire hunting tools are in. But then they find the grave, and there's no coffin in it.
Hmm.
And then he says it must be inside of the castle, or it could be anywhere on the grounds. And he's like, but there is still time. She has not returned, and she will not return until she has glutted herself on the blood of at least one victim.
Yeah.
And that's he says at least one victim, so I guess it qualifies it in a way so she can have as many victims as she wants, but she needs at least one before she can come hang out with the shroud and I don't know whatever she does. But yes, he says some other kind of cool things, and this is all like one big monologue of his, and he says vampires are intelligent beings. They know when the forces of good are against them. She will want to rest in her coffin for a long time. I mean, so then Morton's like, we must find the shroud. He's into the shroud. But this idea of so she knows the forces are good or against her. So since that is the case, she needs to rest in her coffin for a long time. Why do you think that is?
Who knows? I think
Yeah.
that's part of the rules that this film creates. But she has had the forethought of hiding her coffin so that
Yeah.
it's not where people would think it is. Um,
Do you think they thought that was just something cool for Hartog to say?
yeah, they just
They're like,
thought it was
man.
cool for him to say. I like it. Yeah, it doesn't really have much bearing really on the story on what we're seeing here. Uh, it's like they've added a lot of fluff to his monologues to spruce it up as if he's a version of Van Helsing, like you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier in the conversation.
They could have like I mean, it's like they explain a lot there, but then at the same time, they keep it so weirdly worded that it's still kind of ambiguous into a like because he doesn't specifically say I mean, I was like, how does he know? How does he know that she'll rest in her coffin for a long time? And because we don't I don't know. I mean, there's some odd rules because she can like go and eat servants in town and not have to stay in her coffin, but like a few hours, because
Yeah,
you would think if she doesn't come back to the Morton house, like the Mademoiselle before she was turned would be like, Where's Carmilla today?" I don't know how long Morton would be away on his trip, but I would assume it wouldn't be that long. I don't know.
well, back at Morton's house,
Yeah,
Carmilla has her altercation with Carl, um,
right.
and don't they have a little fight there, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like Carl arrives. He's got a sword. He's
That's right.
yeah, and she overpowers him and takes the sword away from him. But then he has another knife eventually, and he pulls that out, and it looks like a cross, and he
Yeah,
uses
upside
that. Yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. That's what makes her dissolve. And then he carries Emma back upstairs, and at that point, he saved Emma. It cuts oddly. No, this is an interesting thing for a Hammer film, but especially like we said earlier, it's not necessarily the same people doing it, but it does become like the cuts become very. There's a lot of cuts back and forth between the graveyard and the house, and it
Yes.
keeps cutting back and forth between Carl and Emma like freaking out over seeing feeling what's happening to Carmilla. So it's kind of interesting the way that they progressed a lot with how many cuts are in the film compared to the earlier Hammer films.
No, I agree with you on that one. I thought it was interesting too. I think it's because of the editing was trying to pull off the timing of what's happening between the two sections because Carmilla has to disappear from Morton's house in order to show back up at the Karsten Castle, and for our group, led by Morton and Hartog and the general, to follow her to where her
Yeah,
real coffin is lies. So she shows up back at the Karsten house and they follow her because they
right.
don't know where her real coffin is. They follow her.
And apparently she's got like a in the stone ground in the floor, right by where her portrait is. She opens up the floor there, and this big stone thing there. She can move it and get in her coffin and hang out. But she screws up. She has that red necklace on, and she accidentally drops it on the floor. And when they come back in there, Morton's looking at the painting, and he probably remembers her having it on when she came downstairs with the red dress earlier in the film. And he looks down but oh, not only that, but it's also in the portrait. She's been wearing that thing, and he looks on the ground, and there it is, and he figures out that she is under the ground there.
Yep. So they dig her out.
Yeah. What,
It's a little lackluster what happens next, but they dig her out and they find her real coffin.
yeah.
And they open it up and she's just sleeping.
Yeah. Well, that's what like she's got the shroud over, but they actually don't do that right away. They say to the chapel, and apparently there's a
Oh,
chapel
that's
in
right.
the
They do do that.
Karnstein castle when they're supposed to be these evil guys. They have a chapel in there too. But then they bring the coffin to the chapel, and that's when they open it. And as we talked about earlier, she's got the shroud on her, and then the general takes it down and to kind of give her access to where he can stake her. The stakes we didn't talk about the stakes. They're actually kind of different in this one. They're like a really long
But it's just like,
stick.
yeah, they're just like long branches
Yeah.
from a tree branch or something.
But it's actually kind of cool because you don't have to have the hammer. You can just pick it up and then slam it down, so it gives it more of a force into the body. I don't. I mean, luckily if you don't have the hammer stake though, because it actually probably would work better than doing the hammer stake because the hammer stake you have to hit it several times. This one's like one plunge,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
found it very visually different and very visually interesting to use that. I don't recall seeing any other vampire movie that kind of uses that same aesthetic in it.
yeah. Well, I guess it all depends on whether you have enough room to use the stake the way that it is. If it was like a if you couldn't have if you didn't couldn't pull it up hot tall enough to slam it in, you'd have a problem getting it in there pretty good.
Logistics.
Yeah, yeah. But then okay, and then this is when the quick cuts start to happen, and then the general and Peter Cushing, he's been saying one line here and there, and it's Peter Cushing, and you got him in your movie, and you give like all the monologues to this other dude, but it is what it is. But then he's like, says he's going to do it.
Yeah.
He says that the Morton character's daughter is hurt, but she's not dead, but his niece is dead, and he feels like he should be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, it's Peter Cushing is the real reason. So, but then so then he kills her. He stabs her with he's already dead, but he kills her again. He stabs her with the stake, and then he lifts her body up and then chops her head off. And it's a pretty cool looking head chop too when it happens.
Well, the head chops are cool in this movie.
Yeah, yeah. It,
uh,
it,
the interesting thing I want to say about this film is that then they go and put her body back into her original grave site.
right,
I
right.
thought that was very interesting that they took the time to do that. Um,
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I guess they felt like it was something they maybe politely needed to do. It's funny they take her head and then Peter Cushing puts it back on top of the body. The Morton says, "Let us pray to God that Styria has been rid of these devils forever." And then that's when he puts the head back on the body.
yeah,
Cuts back to the manor. Carl says it's over because Emma is actually before this she screams when she's staked and she's not quite dead yet. She screams and it's actually causing her agony. And after Camilla's completely dead, after he chops her head off, she's cured.
kill that first vampire. That first vampire, you go back to normal.
We get we get one more look at the Man of Black as they carry the coffin and return it to the grave, and
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he's there, and then the last reveal of the film, which that was an appropriate place for him to be at that point. And then for him to like in that one part where I really thought it was really sucked when he was laughing, and that was like an odd moment for him to be laughing because they were really it would be different if it was like his plan was like for all this to happen, but that was when Carl was heading back to the house. They were like in there, they were finding the graves. Things were not going in their favor, I wouldn't think, unless he just wanted Carmilla to get killed for some reason. But I think it was just like I said, it's badly timed, placed B-roll that they thought looked cool. And so the last is the portrait. You want to talk about the portrait part?
Yeah, yeah. So I was mentioning earlier
Yeah,
about the whole picture of Dorian Gray thing, and I really like the fact that we end the film on the picture of Carmilla, and it slowly dissolves because she's dead. Slowly dissolves to, I guess, what she would look like now,
yeah, like a skeleton. Is yeah,
skeleton.
with some
So
things. Yeah,
I really like the fact that that's how they ended it on. This is so different from other vampire movies. Um, I don't think all the connective tissues always connect, but I do think there's a lot of cool and interesting concepts and ideals in the film, that being one of them.
right.
So
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's a lot of rules, and that they didn't quite have the rules thought out quite right. But
mhm.
there's a lot of there are a lot of good things, a lot of interesting things to connect it, and you can tell they didn't quite have it figured out because we've seen the third one, and we don't see any of this stuff in the
No,
third one. We don't see a painting that they're connected to. They just kind of changed the rules again in that one
yeah, yeah. And
when they bring her back.
I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to see that in the next film as well. Different rules, things that they didn't like in the first film that they dropped, things that they thought that they need to elaborate on more might be more proficient in the next film. It'll be interesting to, to
Yeah.
to watch that one and see, because I haven't seen it and you say you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I think they make the rules really complicated in this one. They're very complicated, and for the most part, then they try to add it in a few things that just don't quite jive. But overall, though, if you're not overthinking it, it is a pretty well made vampire film
Well,
with some nudity in it. That's for a Hammer. It's a pretty good bit of nudity for that time period. For
Well, I always enjoyed Ingrid Pitt, so that
yeah,
could be
yeah.
another reason why I this was one of the earlier films that I saw from Hammer, because I like Ingrid Pitt. I do recall reading about her, and for everyone who's listening, I've mentioned this several times in other podcast episodes in which I actually had to study the Hammer Studio oeuvre in film school in college. I just didn't have the opportunity at that time to actually watch all of those films because we were still in the throes of DVD and at the mercy of companies like Anchor Bay, who decided to produce DVDs of films when they felt like it. We weren't getting all of there wasn't streaming back then. We didn't have Netflix, we didn't have Paramount Plus or HBO
Yeah,
Max,
sure was
Disney
tough to
Plus. So I
find.
couldn't find I had to
Right.
find physical copies of these movies. And a lot of the times I found VHS copies, or I found really, really crappy full screen DVD versions of films is what I saw. Um, so that's how I came about with the Hammer World. I mostly read about them and didn't see most of them until probably the last 10 years, 15 years maybe, is when I caught up with most of them. Dave, you know, they're producing some amazing versions of these damn movies now, which is great. Uh,
Right. Yeah, a lot of these have new 4K transfers, some of them, but this one actually looks really good on Blu-ray. I think they did a transfer of it. Yeah, I'm not sure what was involved with the transfer, but when I was watching it, it looked really good on Blu-ray.
yeah, I'm still watching this on my DVD version.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I'm sure like the Blu-ray was definitely a lot better than that, I'm sure. But
oh
I
yeah,
mean, as far as like, I'm sure like with a 4K, this one may even had a like I didn't read too much into the transfer on this one, unfortunately, but it looks good enough that it may have had a 4K transfer, but not. it was released to Blu-ray with the 4K, maybe because it looked fairly solid. But
Okay.
you know, with the 4K, you're gonna see an uptick in fine detail, and it would also have a HDR grading on it if they did that, which would bring the skin tones to a more lifelike look. It will make like the dark areas darker in general. But when I was watching it though, it looked really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, my copy of this was a double feature DVD copy with Countess Dracula. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
right. Yeah, the Countess Dracula also stars Ingrid Pitt as well.
I think that's why they did the
It's a
twos
double
because they
feature.
both have Ingrid.
Yeah, yeah. She's actually making the Countess Dracula when they were shooting the second one of these, The Lust for a Vampire, because it was like she was supposed to be in that one, but did the Countess Dracula instead. I don't
So,
know.
but now that we're here, are there any other things we could step upon or remember for this film, especially keeping in mind, Dave, that we are going to do the second film eventually, not
Yeah.
yet, but eventually down the line this year?
No, I think we covered it pretty good. Don't
Okay.
have any other notes on it.
Okay. All right. So, Dave, obviously, I want to thank you for joining us on this conversation of horror in which we talked about the vampire lovers. We now come to that time where we normally just rate the movie between 1 and 5, one being four, five being amazing, and we like to take an object, a quote, or saying within the film to attribute to our rating. Where on the spectrum, Dave, do you place the vampire lovers, and what object, quote, or saying would you like to attribute to that?
Well, I'm gonna jokingly use something that I think doesn't work within the movie
Okay.
as the totem on it. I'm gonna use the man in black randomly sitting on a horse out in the yard. I'm gonna give it 3.5 of those.
Oh, nice, because I was going to give it 3.5 too, but I was going to give it 3.5 upside down daggers that look like crosses.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty clever that he had the sword and that's completely useless, and then the dagger upside down is what.
Yeah, yeah, kind of the swashbuckling sword.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot to like in this movie. It's kind of in between that old score. Jeez, old score. Old. I said
Old
it again.
school.
Old school. Hammer films that started in 1958 and is starting to progress into the 70s with a little bit more violence and definitely more nudity and fairly for Hammer the lesbian aspect of it. It wasn't shocking to you. It wasn't necessarily shocking to me, but it was definitely more pronounced here, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it from the film when the first time I saw it.
Mm. Well, if we ever get to doing the Franco, James Franco, Jess Franco,
Yeah, James
and
Franco.
John Roland films, then we'll have lots of to talk about in terms of nudity and violence and.
But this, I mean, I guess it kind of in some ways still keeps it somewhat elegant and somewhat tasteful,
Yes,
and it's really that performance by Ingrid Pitt as Carmilla is really strong.
yes.
They even used her real voice in this. A lot of times they would have dubbed them, but they did use her real voice. I thought that Peter Cushing was underutilized. He was really I really liked his performance in the first act. When he shows back up for the end, it's like it's not that his performance sucked. I just think he was like kind of sidelined for most of the film, and he did get to make the end kill, which was cool. But he definitely was sidelined for like a good like 30 minutes, and then when he does come back up, he's upstaged by Hartog for most of the end part.
Yeah. I'll agree with you on that. I'll agree with you on
But
that. I could
but
always
yeah, yeah.
take more Peter Cushing no matter what. Yeah. Uh, so with that, I want to thank you all for listening to us talk about this film. We hope that you've had a great time listening to us have a conversation about the vampire lovers. If you've never seen it before, we hope that you will go out there and check it out. Please make sure to check out the other podcast episode on Twins of Evil and make sure to like, follow, share, subscribe, do that thing with you do with your favorite podcast or your favorite podcast app, Spotify or YouTube, so you never miss an episode, especially since we still got one more in the Karstein trilogy to go to. With that, I also want you to check out our other podcast, Conversations in Horror. That is a podcast in which we dedicate to all things horror, all decades, all subgenres. You're going to like that one if you like horror or if you're a huge horror fan in general. From all of us here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we hope you have a pleasant time listening to us, and we will see you on the next episode. As long as you don't have your neck or breast bitten by a vampire. Have a good day. Conversations in Hammer Studio Horrors is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures and Something Wicked Entertainment podcast. It is hosted by Kevin L. Powers, original music provided by Dusty Ellison, produced and directed by Kevin L. Powers. Our executive producer is Kelly A. Inoka. This podcast is produced in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Conversations in Hammer Studio Horrors is part of the Conversations in Horror podcast franchise and is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures. No part of this program can be used without express permission from Broken Lighthouse Pictures.